how is Android strategic for Google? All right, everyone, welcome back to the Exponent interview series. Today I have Bharani, and he's going to be going over a BizOps interview. And a little bit about myself. You all may recognize me from some of our product management interviews, as well as our solution architect interviews. My name is Mohammed Hussein. I'm a solutions architect at Dropbox. However, I do have some background in product strategy and product management. And like I said before, I'm joined here with Bharani, who works in product strategy over at Chime. So Bharani, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you all today. My name is Bharani, and I'm currently working in Chime as a part of the product strategy and operations team. I was an Exponent user, found it extremely useful during my interview prep. I was particularly looking at product strategy and product management roles and was an ardent user of Exponent. So a big shout out to Exponent here. And before this, I have around 5 years of experience in product management in Gartner. I am very passionate and thrilled about product strategy and operations and general product management as such.
That's awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into the interview questions. So I have my interview hat on. So Bharani, tell me, how is Android strategic for Google?
Got it. Just give me like a couple of minutes where I, jot down my strategy and how I'm going to approach this question.
Absolutely.
Okay. Perfect. I'd like to start with a few clarifying questions and also an assumption associated with it. Is it okay to assume that when you talk about Android, it's Android for the mobile platform or the smartphone platform, particularly? And I think it'll help me structure the conversation better because it is much more penetrated into the market compared to Android for like your smartwatch or any wearables. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Yeah, you can focus on Android for mobile phones.
Fantastic. All right, then. So this is the overall structure that I would like to follow. I'd like to start with what's the overall mission of Google and how Android aligns to that. Then I'd like to break down the word strategy into a few components, starting with how it aligns to Google's business model, how in terms of like the revenue contribution it makes, how does that align to the overall vision of Google. Then also talk about the external market in terms of what are the market trends, what does the competitor look like, and also more importantly, even though it makes perfect sense now, I like to also touch upon how it is very essential for the future as well. So that's how I like to break down strategy. And then finally, I would like to talk about a few potential risks that we have in the current way of Android working, and also talk about opportunities to improve. Is that a fair approach for us to proceed?
Yeah, that sounds good. Excited to hear what you have.
Absolutely. So in terms of the overall mission, right? The Google's mission is to organize information and make it universally accessible and available to everyone. And in terms of how Android fits perfectly into this mission is that the key thing, the key necessity for Google to collect all the information is for people around the world to start using its applications and its software. And the more the people are using it in the right way, the more information Google will be able to collect and deliver it back to them. So Android sits perfectly into this ecosystem of making people use the system and also contributing back to them. So I think it's a perfect fit in terms of the mission of Google. Talking about the breaking down strategy, and my first breakdown there is the business model, right? Coming back to the fundamental core of Google, which is Google wants to understand users better, right? So the more it understands how people are using certain applications, they'll be able to provide them with information. And I'm not talking just about targeted ads. That's of course a big benefit of predicting user behavior, but also in terms of actual information consumption, predicting user behavior is extremely important. And the more people come into this, the ecosystem of using Google products, the better it is for Google and Android to serve them even better. So the second aspect of that is Android is known for how open source it is and how free it is for people to start using and developing and stuff like that. And one of the key differentiators of Android is that it is not restricted to a Google hardware ecosystem, but it's more available to OEMs. And that kind of openness also aligns very well with what Google does. If you look at Google search engine or Google Maps, that openness is reflected back in Android as well. So it's a perfect fit in terms of its business model. Touching upon the revenue aspect of it, I find that Android fits several elements of the revenue contribution. The first one being the most important in terms of ad revenue. The impacts of predicting user behavior and needs means that we can provide information on how what are the products, services are available to the people to meet their needs, and that's where this ad revenue comes in. And Android being the center of the the mobile application, the mobile OS, makes this supremely possible because any user behavior triggered through the OS could be reflected in terms of YouTube ads, in terms of G Suite ads, in terms of Google Maps and the ads associated with it. So it is kind of the center of the ecosystem from which we will be able to provide ad revenue impacts into different Google products that we already have. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, even though we talk about Android being open source and free, any app that is put in Play Store and is a revenue contributor, firstly in terms of just in-app sales, right? Basic app sales and any app downloads, that Google takes a specific cut out of it. And the second thing is any in-app purchases that we make, like subscriptions that you make through it, all that is also a revenue contributor to Google as such. The next thing is the actual device sales, right? And as we speak today, we heard about like Pixel products coming in and the Pixel phones that are coming in and stuff like that. And the biggest selling point for Pixel phone, apart from its superior hardware and technology, is this seamless integration into the Android ecosystem. And that is what is expanding into the ecosystem concept that is often referred to by Apple enthusiasts. And Android is helping Google reach that ecosystem mode for non-Apple users. And the last one is revenue distribution for device manufacturers or OEMs. So whenever like Samsung or any other smartphone out there that is going to be operating the Android OS, there is always the revenue sharing associated with it. So Android is a major contributor to Google's revenue through multiple ways. Just to summarize, in terms of fundamentally the ad revenue, the Play Store, and also in terms of the overall device sales from Pixel and the revenue contribution from different device manufacturers. The next thing I would like to touch upon is the overall market scenario. One of the fundamental problems in terms of predicting user behavior and bringing the world together by providing access to technology is the cost associated with providing this technology to different areas. If you look at countries that are not very well developed, a computer is a luxury, right? But a $50 Android phone is much more accessible to the people. So it has a social impact of delivering this technology to people and making it more accessible. And the benefit of that Google gets from that is trying to understand the needs and behavior of these people who would not be able to afford a computer or definitely an Apple device. So that is the impact that Android is able to make in the market as such. And if I recollect, the last time I saw, about more than a third of the smartphone OS market share is held by Android. And That Android ecosystem is fantastic in terms of the penetration, but what it helps additionally is that any Android OS comes with pre-installed Google apps in terms of the Google search engine, the Google Drive, the YouTube and Google Maps and stuff like that, which means that people default to these applications right from the beginning and causing or helping better penetration into Google's other native apps as well. One of the threats that we primarily see for Google and its market trends is in two regions. One is in China and one is in the US, and the US market being dominated by iOS devices. And in China, the specific problem that we have is about the Play Store that they have, and they having their own native applications that they would like to be run instead of Google's G Suite application. So those are the two deterrent factors in terms of the market space that Android has. This is what we have in terms of the current market scenario. But if you look at what's the future, there are a few elements in terms of building this overall connected ecosystem. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the wearable market. The wearable market today is, if there's a common hypothesis that the next step in personal computing device is non-smartphones, which means that you'll be able to do everything that your mobile phone does using like smart technologies like very efficient headphones or your smartwatch and stuff like that. And that market is currently being dominated by Apple because of its prominence in the ecosystem of connecting this Apple Watch with your AirPods and stuff like that. And Google is slowly edging into that territory in terms of the wearable market, both by Pixel hardware, but also in terms of the Android OS being available to other devices. So it is very much poised to capture the future of personal computing in that segment. The second thing I believe it's going to be phenomenally helpful is the whole Android Auto. Even though that market in particularly in the US is lower now, but it's poised to increase significantly in the future. And the more we connect people to the ecosystem of Android, the more that Android Auto was going to be helpful. The third thing, which is a very big competitive edge for Android compared to its biggest market competitor, which is iOS, is that the whole Internet of Things or the smart appliances. In terms of smart appliances, Samsung has oftentimes built in smart technologies in terms of refrigerators, in microwave ovens, which have some form of Android OS running in the systems. And even though the penetration today is not significantly higher, but it is very essential in terms of like smart home functionality, bringing the Internet of Things all in together. So future-wise also, Android is going to be very, very critical and strategic for Google in terms of the Internet of Things, home appliances category, the Android Auto, and the whole ecosystem, thinking about what's next after smartphones. Having said all that, I do find that there are some potential risks associated with Android that we need to be aware of. One of the fundamental things is the lack of a significant presence in the hardware system. And what I mean by that is Pixel phones are great, Pixel devices are great, but the penetration is not significantly higher today. And there is often complete reliance on third-party manufacturers like Samsung and or LG or other smartphone manufacturers in the world. There are two disadvantages to that. The first one being the quality of the experience, right? So, and as in, as we progress through the day, we find that smartphones are being more accessible and stuff like that, and people start expecting superior quality even from very cheap smartphones out there. So there's a big question of the quality of the device that is hosting Android OS that we need to be careful about. The second thing is, if you see Android's market, its prominence is shot in the world because of Samsung's phones using Android, which is a big threat because Samsung, being a technology giant in itself, if it comes up with a superior OS of itself, that would be a potential threat to Android in the future. And this is a cause of concern because this is exactly what happened for Android in the wearable market, because Fitbit or Garmin have their own specific OS and they have been like dominant. And this is why Android specific wearables have not been able to capture the market, which is now being dominated by Apple Watch. So that, I think, is a big risk for Android and Google as such that we need to focus on. The biggest opportunity, I believe, for Android in the future is to build that connected ecosystem of Android-based devices. One of the fundamental reasons or levers that Apple is able to retain its users into its products is the connected ecosystem. And Android has several opportunities in terms of penetrating several segments of those connected ecosystems to to make that connected experience for its users. One of the potential spaces I see is the tablet market, right? And that is a space that is completely dominated by iPads today. And even though the Chrome OS and the Chromebook was launched, the capabilities or the functionality of this Chrome OS is very limited to web-based applications. And that is a place where Android and Google could particularly focus on, because it bridges the gap between a smartphone and a computer, and it could meet most of the needs of a regular user trying to do their personal stuff, like watching videos or doing any basic editings and writing text and stuff like that. So that is a big space that I think Android should definitely focus on and capture to build this entire connected ecosystem.
Awesome. So Bharani, I do have one question, and you did sort of allude to it by talking about, Samsung potentially being a threat, or the growth within China and China's restrictions and whatnot. What would you say, though, either out of those or maybe even something you haven't mentioned, is what would you say is the biggest threat to Android's growth?
Sure. One, apart from everything that I said in terms of like reliance on third-party manufacturers or like the Chinese restrictions that they have, I think the biggest threat to Android's growth is if they don't capitalize on building this entire ecosystem and smooth flow of informations and user journeys across devices. And instead of providing a singular experience in each of a person's smart device, because I'm sure every device that we use today is a smart device. It's all electronics that we use today. And the lack of a connected experience between all this device is a potential pitfall that will restrict Android's growth definitely in much more developed countries. And this could potentially pose a threat in terms of both new customer acquisition, because the market is so competitive that we have to pull in users from the Apple ecosystem into the Android ecosystem, and that is a big need for anyone moving into the system. And also in terms of customer retention, right? If there is a fantastic phone that is coming out with a different OS from a different manufacturer, there is nothing stopping an Android user today to try out that ecosystem or go into a new OS itself, because the loss that people are going to get is minuscule compared to moving from a well-connected ecosystem. So it has issues in terms of both new customer acquisition, also in terms of retention. And until we build that ecosystem of Android devices, I think that's a big problem for that Android and Google particularly have to focus on for the future.
Awesome. All right, so we'll end scene here. Before I give my thoughts, how do you think that the interview went, Bharani?
I think I did. I'll start with what I did well. I think I did get the structure correctly. in terms of breaking down the overall problems. What I had written down, I started breaking down the word strategy, started with a specific set of the Android ecosystem itself, which was on smartphones or mobile platforms. What I could have done better is particularly after I finished each section, probably I could have paused and asked you, is there something you like to probe on in that specific like revenue model? Maybe you would have had a question and stuff like that. I could have probably paused there. And the one thing I know I summarized the individual sections, but I could have given like a 2-minute elevator pitch at the end saying like, these are the reasons why Android is very strategic for Google. So I think that's something that I could have done better.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Your structure was amazing. The way that you kind of played it out. I work in sales now as a solutions architect, and before we go into customer calls, we always set an agenda about, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about in the call. And that's exactly what you did here. It's a really good way for you to engage your interviewer. It honestly felt like I was, watching like a YouTube video about, about like Google and their growth with Android, or like, a TED Talk or something. So you did a really good job in being able to hook me in, and you were very thorough and concise. I do agree that you should have maybe stopped and asked for questions. One, to make sure that your interviewer or your interviewer is engaged and whatnot, that they're not, checking their phone or something like that, right? But it's also good for you so that you can be able to catch your breath, maybe drink some water, because that's also very important as well. You don't want to have, that random like voice crack or something, but you still did a good job in not having that, but it's still always good. Whether you're either presenting or you're giving an interview, stop, catch your breath, use that opportunity to ask your interviewer or your audience, hey, do you have any questions on anything that I've said? But yeah, overall, I think you did an amazing job. If I were the hiring manager, I would hire you on the spot. But awesome. Thank you so much, Bharani. And for those of you who are watching at home, please give this a like, share with friends, and also give us a subscribe as well. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below to let us know that this video is valuable for you. And of course, check out hundreds more videos just like this at tryexponent.com. Thanks for watching, and good luck on your upcoming interview.